This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our main website where you can listen to the X-Zone, 724-365, www.xzoneradiotv.com. In just a couple of days, 2 days to be exact, we will be at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, Ontario. I believe the breakfast is completely sold out. That is on Friday morning. But no matter where you are around the world, you'll be able to watch the live feed on pay-per-view by going to www.digitalbroadcastnetwork.ca. For all the information about the Alien Cosmic Expo, www.aliencosmicexpo.com. Exonation, my next guest is a lady that I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years. She is undoubtedly one of the hardest working UFO researchers that there has been, that there is, and in my humble opinion, that there will ever be. Going back to March the 13th, 1997, the Phoenix Lights. What were those lights that traversed the skies over the state of Arizona and Phoenix? My guest this hour, I'm sure everyone knows by now, is Dr. LYNNE KITEI. And Dr. LYNNE is known worldwide for her work, her films, her presentations that she has done on the Phoenix Lights, UFOs, and the strange lights that appear in the skies that are seen by so many around the world. Joining me now is Dr. LYNNE KITEI. And Dr. LYNNE, always a great pleasure having you on the show.
Rob, thank you so much. I really appreciate being on, and hopefully one of these years soon I'll be in Ontario at one of your conferences, because there is so much more information to be told about the Phoenix Lights, and so much mis and disinformation out there that truly appreciate you, you having me share the rest of the Phoenix Lights story, because most people don't realize that it wasn't just March 13th, number one. These phenomena have been appearing for centuries. That's a whole story in itself, and continue to appear worldwide. But there were similar sightings that my husband and I actually saw up close and personal, and I got photographs of, 35-millimeter photographs of 2 years before the mass sighting, and also 35-millimeter photographs of the same phenomena head-on, turning into a V-shape, 2 months before the mass sighting, confirmed by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport, as it has mile-wide, equidistant lights that seem to be attached to something that you would hear again by thousands of people on March 13th, that actually turned against the wind as I was shooting it above Class B restricted airspace. There's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport, and any aircraft that goes into that area, particularly 1,000 feet altitude as this was, must call into the tower, and no one did, so they were alarmed. And when I contacted them the next morning, because it was very unnerving not having an explanation for the close sighting that we had in 95, to see this mile-wide formation of equidistant lights that was just massive and spectacular. I called around and did find air traffic controllers, and they saw the same thing at the same time. One of them was a meteorologist and said that it actually turned as a unit against the wind and then elevated slowly and moved behind South Mountain, which is the south of the airport. So I said, so what was it? And there was silence. And then one of them said, beats me. I said, you're air traffic controllers. You're supposed to know what's in our airspace. They had no clue. In fact, they ruled out every earthly possibility, including flares and balloons and Chinese lanterns and even skydivers with lights. And we stayed in contact, and I continued photographing these unusual formations of these orbs. And we're talking giant balls that were just so unusual, amber color from my vantage point, and up until and including March 13th. Now, for me, it was just another night, but for thousands of people that were outside purposely looking up at the sky for a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was very clear in this northwest sky that evening, they also caught a glimpse of a mile to 2 mile wide, and very credible reports, either these orbs, and I call them an orb because the light didn't extend outside the edge, that was attached, that seemed to be attached to something like the air traffic controllers had shared, or actual craft. And that's the other thing, Rob, because, you know, you'll hear in the media, and even most ufologists, unless they've studied my work, have no idea that it wasn't just one or two events as is out there.
Yeah.
But there were many events, actually starting as early as 3 p.m. that day. And they, as I mentioned, there were other people that were also seeing them for weeks before, and actually there was a big sighting on the Navajo Nation the day before. They thought it would be big news of these orbs going around in circles and then semicircles, and the whole town, they're so used to it, and that's a whole other thing we can get into if we have time, the Native American openness to these other intelligences. The Hopi even have protocols to invite them in, and here they take out their lawn chairs, and for an hour or two they were outside watching these things, and they thought it would be big news, and then it was eclipsed by our mass sighting the next day, which again, we had reports starting as early as 3 p.m., daylight sightings of craft. It wasn't just orbs. There were craft, and there were 9 or 10 different craft. If you go to the Phoenix Lights Network website, www.thephoenixlights.net, if you Google Phoenix Lights, it usually comes up first, and go to the GAP page. Besides the photo page that has my unique collection of these anomalous aerial phenomena on 35 millimeter, which are just stunning, and I've gone to extreme lengths to have them explained to me at university and military optical physicists and experts. And across the board, they are true unknowns. Nobody can explain what they are or deny them. But what's really interesting is that if you go to the GAP page, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project, you'll see illustrations from a 12-year compilation of the different craft that thousands of people saw. And we're talking over 10,000 people, and not just in Arizona. We're talking in Arizona, as well as 5 o'clock hour. They were seen by Native Americans in New Mexico, the 7 o'clock hour in California, and continued throughout the night. In fact, I'll get to a couple other interesting asides. 11:30, two commercial airlines saw one of these craft, these 1 to 2 mile wide craft, actually hovering over Las Vegas, and that's a whole story in itself. And then at 3 a.m. the next morning, as these continued, by the way, there was a call to the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, to Peter Davenport from an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base who very, very detailed report. In fact, we had some of the audio of this report in the documentary, and people hear quite clearly, and it's quite professional, that there was one of these craft that was hovering right over Central Phoenix at 7th Avenue and Indian School at 8:30 that evening, and military jets were sent out to intercept it and get gun camera film, which they said they did, and as they approached it about a mile away, the lights started to dim, and as they got closer, about a half mile away, the whole thing just blinked out. And this crewman said that he helped one of the pilots out of his craft because he was so shaken up by it. And then later, at 5:30 the next morning, we actually have a crew, a Boeing crew, coming into work who reported at Sky Harbor International Airport one of these crafts hovering over their tarmac. So there were many things happening. And as far as a craft, whether it was 8 or 9 different craft, or it was one craft that could morph, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or what the investigators finally concluded after really studying these meticulously for over 12 years, is that there was a parade happening throughout Arizona and beyond, because there were a number of different activities happening at the same time with the orb formations and these different craft. It's mind-boggling when you not only consider that, but you consider the technology, because these craft were very low altitude. We're talking rooftop level. In many instances, people said they could have thrown a stone at it. It was a rock at it. It was so low. Totally, totally silent. In fact, some people saw these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it. Others saw these craft as it's gently, non-threatening, by the way, very slowly going over their heads. And we have a pilot in the documentary who actually looked up, which he calls a well or a canister of spinning energy. And then all of a sudden it takes off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. We have one of the reports, one of the pictures, the illustrations, is actually of a craft that split in two and shot straight up into the air. So, we're talking about technology that doesn't even come close to anything that we have 18 years later.
How do we try to explain this, Dr. Lynn? Because, there are so many so-called ufologists out there. And I'll be very honest with you, Dr. Lynn, you've known me for a number of years now, and I don't mince eggs. Mm-hmm. I don't give very many people credit. You, on the other hand, I believe. So what do you think that these craft that were so big, that were seen by so many people, and apparently, as you said, the observers did not feel threatened whatsoever, what do you think they were doing? Were they on a reconnaissance mission?
That's a wonderful question, and, I have to tell you, besides the fact that I don't know what they were, I know that they were.
Yeah.
And it's time we get the information out in the open, and that's why I finally came forward after 7 years of anonymity. As you know, Rob, I stayed anonymous. I did not want to come forward and doing my own homework, because I saw these things up close and personal, and once you do, and I'm sure there's people that are listening out there that have had similar experiences, and most anomalies can be explained. Let's be clear. Only a small percentage cannot. But just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. That's why we have to get this out in the open, and we have to address it and accept it and study it so we can find out who's driving these things and why they were here, and also move forward in our own evolution. But you made a very good point, and it really is a very important point. In all the data, and I really try, as you know, to stick to the data and be as scientific as I can, and let people decide for themselves. I mean, it is what it is. Take a look at the pictures. Yep. Again, I've gone to great lengths to have them explained, and to this date, I still can't. And when you really look at the data, it speaks for itself. There has not been one, and this is a really interesting aspect of the whole sighting, not one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. What makes that really interesting, number one, is when you look at the whole picture, it seems whoever did this wanted to be seen. Obviously, thousands of people were looking up at the sky, the Hale-Bopp comet. Maybe they knew that was happening and showed themselves, but in a non-threatening way. That's number one. Number two, the effect that it had on the witnesses themselves is stunning in real time and long term. Because the movie Independence Day was real popular about 6 months before, and we have a whole section in our documentary where we really address the fact that we're so inundated with threat, and harm, that when we see something unusual, how do you think you're going to feel? I mean, the
Sure.
kids, particularly when they see this mile-wide formation of lights, V formation coming towards them, we're jumping up and down, Independence Day. But as it came closer, a calmness came over everyone, adults and children alike, a connectiveness to the phenomena. And some people even got telepathic messages.
I was just going to ask you about that. Was there any telepathic or an attempt of
Absolutely.
communication with the people who were watching the phenomena?
There were. I tell
Yeah.
one story in the book about a psychiatrist and his family were actually en route from Tucson, which is 2 hours south of Phoenix, to Phoenix for a swim meet with the whole family and a friend of the daughter, and they forgot about it. I mean, that's really interesting too. It was like 6 months later when they happened to see something, a news report about it on the news, when they turned to each other and said, "Wait a minute, I remember that happened to us. It was right over us." And actually, they described this craft that they saw that was directly above them, extending the arms, the wings, extending over both sides of the highway to the land on either side. And the wife said that she got a telepathic message not to worry about it. They're not here to harm us. And there were many people that actually, had messages or feelings, and certainly the after effect. That's really poignant because people, it affected people at such a deep level. And come on, Rob, I mean, helicopters and balloons and whatever don't affect people like that.
Sure.
To this day, I mean, there are people that changed their eating habits. They wouldn't eat meat anymore. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
And other people that went into the peace movement and the environmental movement. I mean, it really woke people up, not only to their presence in a very gentle way, non-threatening way, and that we're not alone in the universe, because that's what people came away with, to this day. But it also woke people up to what we're doing. I mean, there's a message to this, and it's a message that's happening worldwide, and it's not just with anomalous aerial phenomena, sightings, and experiences. One of the other things that I found really, really interesting, if you want me to get into it, is that there were a number of witnesses to the Phoenix Lights that also shared that they had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting. In fact, the psychiatrist did, that's what brought it to mind. But what really struck me is that I did too. And I get into my whole near-death experience in the book. In fact, I'm going to be talking about my near-death experience in an upcoming conference in L.A. called Heaven Can Wait. Paul Andrews, who produced Contact in the Desert, is
Yes.
part of that conference, which I just spoke at a few weeks ago in Palm Springs, is also doing this near-death experience conference with Dr. Raymond Moody and Paul Purry, who actually wrote the foreword of my book. He's a New York best-selling author in near-death experience and others. But at any rate, I found that so, it really took me aback that other people also had a near-death experience as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting, and I thought, geez, could there possibly be a connection between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body experience, unexplained aerial phenomena, that have a mystical light that's associated with the experience? And lo and behold, just like I was finding, because I knew nothing about this topic, by the way, Rob, I knew nothing at all. I wasn't interested until we had that, close sighting in 95, 2 years before the mass sighting. I never thought about UFOs, and then suddenly, it's into my consciousness, and once thousands of people saw what I had, I started really looking for a logical source and meaning for what I witnessed and photographed. I have yet to find it. If anything, it opened up a whole new world to me that ultimately I felt obliged as not only a scientist and a physician to let people know they're not alone and they're not crazy, but also as an educator. I produce video and workbook curriculums on vital health issues. I work with NBC and USA Cable on all kinds of awards and stuff, and Discovery Education distributes them, and we'll talk about a project I'm working on now for kids, a curriculum. But getting back to the near-death experience, when I started looking, I started finding, again, such credible data that confirmed the Omega Project. If you ever heard of that, with Dr. Kenneth Ring at the University of Connecticut. It's like a 4-inch book. It's really hard to get through. But he absolutely found a connection. Dr. Raymond Fowler, who was involved with the Andreessen case, as well as Dr. Bruce Grayson and others, really confirmed that not only is the experience very similar, which is really, shocking when you look at these different experiences being so similar when they're happening, but the after effect is so profound. The awakening, the enlightenment, the connectedness that one feels not only to the universe, but to the earth and to each other, that is in such a deep, deep soul level. It changes the person forever, and it's such a positive transformation that I started calling all unexplained phenomena UP and up, so that when somebody has this experience, this anomalous experience, whatever it is, not only is it connected, but we're all connected. I mean, there is a message to this, which I'll get to at the very end. But what's really interesting, Rob, if I can get into it, is how the story unfolded, how the Phoenix Light story unfolded.
Please.
Because most people have no clue.
Please, especially the new people who have just joined us around the world on the Starcom Radio Network, and I'm sure they'd love to hear it. Please go ahead, Doctor.
Well, what's very interesting, Rob, is that here thousands, and we're talking over 10,000 people, had something so unusual go right over their heads. I mean, even just a public safety issue. There was nothing afterwards. There was no investigation, no explanation. It was uncanny, really. I mean, it was like people would go to the officials and say, what's going on? What was that? And they would say, oh, something happened on March 13th. And then months later, well, first of all, there was one elected official, Councilwoman Vice Mayor of Phoenix.
Frances Barwood. Yeah.
Right. In May, now this is months later, this happened March 13th, okay, but in May, because so many of her constituents were calling her and saying, what's going on? Why isn't there an investigation? Happened to mention that, maybe we should look into it. She was plastered by the media. I mean, that's one big reason I was so happy I stayed anonymous, because anybody that did come forward in those days, in 97, the Internet was just getting started, and, I mean, it was just the ridicule and the snickering and the jokes were rampant in those days. But at any rate, other than her, there wasn't any official that did anything until, on June 18th, there was a front page USA Today article. For the first time, people outside of Arizona learned about the mass sighting called the Phoenix Lights. And overnight, and again, the Internet was just getting started, it went viral. I mean, it was unbelievable. By the next morning, every morning show, Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, I mean, on and on and on. It was unbelievable how overnight it just hit everywhere around the world. And when the, people around the world, especially the reporters, would start talking to the witnesses, their stories were so honest and so heartfelt and so detailed that they, too, were saying, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? Well, interestingly, by late morning the very next day, and this is June 19th, we get a big announcement on the news and radio and whatever that the former governor, Fife Symington, is calling a press conference that afternoon.
I remember that one.
To reveal what he said, the culprit of the lights over Phoenix. Now, again, it wasn't just Phoenix, so let's make that clear. It was, entire Arizona throughout and beyond. But that's what he announced, and everybody took it seriously, Rob. I mean, we had parents there, we had reporters there, and he comes marching out, one of his aides, in a giant alien head costume, and made a mockery of the whole thing, which really offended the people in the audience. I mean, I have to tell you, parents were really disconcerted because, here they see something as big as a giant, shopping center, and he's making a joke out of it. Well, anyway, that put a lid on it for a little bit. And I have to tell you again, I tried to do my homework as diligently as I could, and I called every military base here and tried to talk to as high up as I could. And every single person I talked to, I have a number of conversations in my book that are quite comical because they were just as curious as we were. They had no idea what it was. And suddenly I get a call A month later, this was July 24th, from one of the heads of PR at the Air National Guard, and she said, "Oh, Dr. Lynn, I think we know what those lights were back in March." And I was thrilled. I was looking for any logical explanation. I said, "You do?" She says, "Yeah, do you believe in all these months nobody ever thought to look at the log for visiting Air National Guard, and the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares, military illumination Lu-2 flares, in Operation Snowbird," which, by the way, I learned later meant, in military terms, diversionary tactical maneuvers, which has been a diversion ever since, whether they did it or not. "And that must be what some people saw," she said. So I said, "Well, wait a minute. When were they in town?" She said, "March 1st to the 15th. I said, "Well, were they in town in January?" She said, "No." I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Well, I have 35-millimeter photographs of the same exact phenomena in the same exact location that not only air traffic controllers confirmed the next morning it's hovering over Class B restricted airspace, 1,000 feet altitude, but they confirmed the morning after the mass sighting, which I caught the signature video of the mass sighting, that it was in the same place then, too." She said, "You never told me that." And I said, "Besides, you're trying to say that flares," and by then I, again, was trying to find any logical explanation, including flares, that cannot keep formation. They drift and drop with the wind haphazardly. They're on a parachute and have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself, and they illuminate the area around it. That's what they're used for. By the way, there wasn't one witness, not one to date, that saw the true unknowns that describe that kind of description. I said, "And you're trying to tell me that flares that cannot keep a formation traverse the entire state in a rock-solid, equidistant, mile-wide V array for hours?" And she says, "I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you." Well, I'm still waiting. Okay.
All right, Dr. Lynn, you and I have to take a break. Please stand by. Exonation. Dr. Lynne KITEI is our special guest. www.thephoenixlights.net. That's www.thephoenixlights.net. And Dr. Lynn and I will be back on the other side of this short group of commercials as the X Zone continues from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. We'll be back. Don't go away.
In his new book, Wandering About, author David Strumfeld talks about the universe, existence, civilization, and the nature of mankind. Wandering About is a comprehensive guide that discusses man's everlasting struggle to learn what his place in the universe is and what the true purpose of his existence is all about. By dealing with many forms of science and humanity, Wandering About also serves as an intellectual autobiography, an expedition through author David Strumfeld's mind and his life as a human being. Through the reader's views, readers will learn many relevant things such as the development of civilization through the ages, how science helped mankind to make many crucial discoveries about the universe, why people's curiosity and imagination never get satisfied, and much more. Wandering About promises to push the reader's reasons and thinking to the very edge. To order Wandering About by David Strumfeld, go to www.wanderingabout.net. That's www.wanderingabout.net. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X-Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
The Alien Cosmic Expo will be held in Brantford, Ontario, June 26, 27, 28, and will feature 24 internationally acclaimed experts and researchers of UFOs, crop circles, alien abductions, and much more in this 3-day 2015 summer Canadian event. Experts in the field of extraterrestrials and alien encounters, out-of-body experiences, past life regression, soul reading, psychic, and mediumship will all be presented with professionalism, integrity, and credibility, making the Alien Cosmic Expo the largest event of its kind in Canada for 2015. The exhibitor hall will feature a spectacular lineup of gifted mediums, psychics, astrologers, channelers, aura photography, healers, as well as books, DVDs, alternative health products, crystals, jewelry, and much more, completing the venue with something for everyone. For all information and to purchase your tickets for the Alien Cosmic Expo, go to www.aliencosmicexpo.com. That's www.aliencosmicexpo.com.
Hi, this is Eric Rawls of Cosmoverse.com, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X-Zone.
Hi, this is Blade Runner, and you are listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X-Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Hi, I'm Laura Sabrin of Feast to Fields Organic Vineyard in Jordan, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X-Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Hi, my name is Lady Ashley, the White Witch of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal talk radio show, The X-Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. LYNNE KITEI is our very special guest. www.thephoenixlights.net. That's www.thephoenixlights.net. I just have a question here for you, Dr. LYNNE. All the people who had this very close encounter of a very special kind, did anyone take a picture that was that close as it passed over their heads?
People tried. You know, people ask me that all the time, and there are a handful of videos from afar, including my own, and that's a whole story in itself, because that really was the only hard evidence that they had to debunk. They could blow off people's stories, but they couldn't blow off the handful of videos from that night, and they're very different, by the way. Mine are the 3 endpoints of a giant V or triangle that thousands of people saw, the 3 end lights, and also, you know, confirmed by air traffic controllers, and really the only video that has been confirmed as officially as a true unknown by Navy optical physicist Dr. Bruce McAbee and others at University of Arizona Optical Science Department, Brooks Institute of Photography, and so forth.
The air traffic controllers, the air traffic controllers who were tracking this craft or this anomaly on radar, were they civilian air traffic controllers or military?
They were civilian. They were at Sky Harbor International Airport, and it did not show up on radar.
Really?
That's what got them alarmed, because when they first saw it, like I had mentioned, anyone in that airspace, that 30-mile radius around the center of the airport, must call in, and no one did. So they were alarmed when they first saw it, and then they took up their high-powered binoculars to look, and in their own words, they saw 6 points of light that totally equal distant from each other, massive span, that over a mile wide, that seemed to be attached to something. We'd hear that over and over again. Now, whether it was separate orbs or a rock solid, some kind of a force field in between that was holding them in rock solid formation, we may never know. And I do have, the pictures that I took are really mind-boggling and important, because I caught this thing. And if you look on the photo page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, you'll see that I caught it head on. And then it did turn into a V shape against the wind, as a meteorologist reported. And when you really look at it, first of all, the second picture is exactly, and this is 2 months before the mass sighting, but thousands would describe during the mass sighting, 5 lights in a V with 2 trailing. You would hear that over and over again. We have radio programs where people are saying it over and over again. Also, the last picture that I have there, you can see that it already turned like to the side, and every other one is bigger than the one in between. So, we're postulating here that there is some kind of force field holding them in rock-solid formation, and the closer arm are the bigger orbs, and the in-between smaller orbs are further away. So there were people. Now, you have to remember, too, and that's a really good question, actually, and people ask me that all the time. In 97, we did have cell phones, even though not too many people had them. They were very clunky, if you remember the big ones, and they didn't have cameras in them. And who goes walking outside with cameras in their hand? Okay?
Good point.
So,
good point.
That is very important to note because, even though people were outside looking up at the Hale-Bopp comet, they didn't have a camera in their hand. Those that did, okay, and there were people that did try to take a picture of these giant, massive craft, it didn't turn out because it blocked out the stars and it turned out black. So that's why there really aren't any pictures of the craft itself. You couldn't take a picture of the craft. I mean, if you tried, it just blocked out the stars and turned out black. Now, we do have video also a month later by a couple out in Buckeye who saw these orbs during the day. Again, and they actually got video of it, which was pretty amazing, okay? So, which couldn't have been flares, okay, because they're not set off during the day, and actually they were in the other direction from Luke Air Force Base anyway. So, and there was a wonderful report that one of the reporters did here on the affiliate Fox station, and he was relentless in trying to find out what was going on as well because he saw it, okay? He saw one of these craft, and he was trying to also find out what was going on. But what was interesting about the videos themselves, myself and an Arrowhead video that was taken by Steve Blonder, he had been seeing these orbs for days before like I was and documenting them on film as well, and actually called MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, to come up to his balcony that very night, and they watched these. I mean, they appeared before he took what is actually an arrowhead. And if you look at that video, I'm sorry, it is impressive. Those lights are attached to something or have a force field holding them together in rock-solid formation. Now, his and mine, and there was another one that was a little earlier that night too, were before 10 o'clock. And this is important to note because after 10 o'clock, shortly after 10 o'clock, there were 2 boomerang videos that were captured, okay? One of them is really impressive, and that's the one that most people have probably seen, that is huge. It's massive, and when you really look at it, again, look at the data. It speaks for itself. I mean, it doesn't budge, okay? It's very impressive, okay? But the other one, which I have never used in anything, is a little haphazard. So that may very well have been flares, even though we don't have any witnesses that came forward to say they saw flares, by the way. But at any rate, it's important to note that those are the ones, especially the one that is so impressive, has come under fire for being flares. Let me tell you how the story unfolded if I can, because as we continue, okay, once they came out with the flare explanation, it was big time, front page, finally the paper had something on the front page about the Phoenix Lights, and it was that they were flares, okay? So think about that one. But at any rate, after they came out with that explanation, it was like, okay, I'm open. I'm a healthy skeptic, okay? Show me. I saw it up close and personal. I know what I saw in 95 was not of this world, and if we have time, I'll get into that. But, hey, if the military did it, do it again. Now, I knew that I had not only taken video on the night of March 13th, when thousands of people saw the same thing I was seeing and photographing, but 2 months before, and when you go back to the pictures, if you go to that photo page on the Phoenix Lights Network website and look at the 2 pictures that I put, the first and the last picture from 95, where we saw right outside our window, literally and figuratively, 3 amber orbs in a pyramid formation a little below us. We're pretty high on the mountain. There's mountains that surround the Valley of Phoenix, and we have a panoramic view. We're very fortunate, and we really enjoy the panoramic view of the city skyline, and we know what helicopters and streetlights and car lights and all look like. And we had been here for a number of years, and these were literally less than 100 yards from our home, and a little below us, very, very treacherous desert landscape behind a home in its gated area, and we're nestled in the mountains, so there is no way, and I underline that it was military. It's a no-fly zone. There's no way that it was military. 3 orbs in a pyramid formation, one on top and 2 closely aligned underneath. And when my husband called me to the window, one wall of our bedroom is a window, and as we watched, I mean, it was just mind-boggling. I mean, what is that? And I wanted to grab my video camera because I've been involved with video for decades, but I didn't want to miss anything. And anybody out there that's had an experience like this knows just what I'm talking about. Sure. When you see something so anomalous and spectacular, you don't want to move.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Dr. Lynn.
Sure.
The craft that you're describing, it seems like it's pure energy, or these pods, these orbs are pure energy. How can we explain the difference between an alleged metallic craft that crashed at Roswell, New Mexico, going back to 1947, and the massive leap in technology that the Phoenix lights are describing?
You know, that's a good question, but let me complete my thought here. When I watched these orbs disappear, they started to implode very, very slowly, like shrink down to a pea size and disappear. Even though we didn't see them, they still felt like they were there. Okay, where did they go? To another dimension, perhaps? And I stepped out on the balcony after the top one disappeared and got a shot of the 2 lower orbs. And I have to share, and I didn't share it with a soul until, I'm going to answer your question here, you'll see, until after the mass sighting 2 years later. It is intently, and by the way, there was an eerie silence as if time had stopped. And I actually just, in the latest edition of the book, shared the analysis that Dr. Bruce Maccabee did and presented actually at the MUFON International Symposium in 1999 for the first time after keeping it private for all these years, which is pretty mind-boggling in itself if we have time to go into that. But there was an eerie silence as if time had stopped. And as I'm staring at these 2 lower orbs, it felt like something was watching me. And going through my mind, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you. And the next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to disappear, and I actually caught a picture of it as it was happening. And that was the only picture that it turned out at the time, but for me it confirmed that something really unusual happened. Now, getting back to these orbs, and they've been around for centuries. They've been around since human documentation began. What's very interesting, and by the way, Rob, I do not believe in coincidence, and I do want to finish how the story unfolded if we can get back to that in a minute. But
sure.
This is a really interesting aspect as well. 6 months before the mass sighting, and it may help to answer your question, I was invited to present my substance abuse. I have an AIDS, teen pregnancy, substance abuse prevention education programs that are distributed by Discovery Education as we speak, and was invited to present my substance abuse program at the Gila Bend Indian Reservation, which is in the basin in between South Mountain and the Estrella Mountain Range. And if you look on the Phoenix Lights Network photo page, that's the first picture, so you can see the topography. They intersect. These 2 mountain ranges intersect, and there's a basin in between. In that basin is very sacred ground, the Gila Bend Indian Reservation. And I presented there 6 months before the mass sighting, and when I looked at my pictures, I could notice that these phenomena kept popping up right where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. So I thought, wow, maybe they saw something. So I called them up, and I said, did anybody happen to see any strange lights on March 13th? And they started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And they said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky people. light beings. It's part of their culture. I had no idea. That was the first time I ever heard of it, and I have learned since that indigenous cultures worldwide are very open to these phenomena, these other intelligences. In fact, many believe that they're ancestors coming to give them inspiration and comfort and motivation and knowledge. And the Hopi here in Arizona actually had protocols to invite them in. So, we're talking about phenomena that have been around since human documentation started. Maybe they've been here since Earth began. We don't know. But as far as the craft goes, yes, it's very interesting that for decades there were disc crafts that were seen. Now we're seeing these triangle crafts. Is there another species that's visiting us? I have no idea. Like I said, I don't know what they are. I'd like to find out. I'd like to be able to study it and move forward and find out. But what's really interesting is how the story unfolded, because after they came out with the flare thing, it kind of put a lid on everything for a while. And we said, hey, I knew that I had pictures from, March 13th, 2 months before, and if you look at my pictures from 95, the same exact phenomena are in the distance, in the same exact location, disappearing there as well. So they were there then, okay? And as I mentioned, there were some people during the mass sighting on March 13th that did see these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it. We can speculate, is that what happened in 95? I don't know, perhaps, but the point is, I have the pictures to prove that they were there, okay? Well, whoever did it multiple times. If it was military, shame on them for, traversing right over people's heads and then denying it for so long, but do it again.
Yeah.
Well, right before the 3rd anniversary of the Phoenix Lights, and I have to say that unless you've read my book, you probably don't know this information. Frances Barwood, the councilwoman, Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, who was the only elected official, she didn't see it, but she was doing her job. She asked for an investigation, and she was plastered with jokes and so forth. She was running 3 years later for Secretary of State on a platform to get answers for the Phoenix Lights and asking for a reenactment. And so were many of us, myself included. Right before the 3rd anniversary, on March 7th, 2000, they announced that 3 Air National Guards were coming into town to send off flares to show everybody the Phoenix Lights. Now, whether they thought they must have been practicing for whatever, but, whether they thought they would confuse the issue or put it to rest or whatever, it was a joke. It was nothing like the Phoenix Lights. In fact, if you go to the news page on the phoenixlights.net website, it's packed with information, but if you go to the news page and you scroll down, I think it's the second column there, there's one block from Arizona Family. It's a CNN affiliate. You'll see a report that shows the footage of their attempted reenactment, and it was nothing like the Phoenix Lights. In fact, it really confirmed for the witnesses that, and this was their shot, that the Phoenix Lights were definitely not flares. And to this day, they have never been recreated or explained. And what's really interesting, too, is right after the 10th anniversary of the mass sighting, for whatever reason, the former Governor Fife Symington divulged publicly that he actually saw it, one of these craft. And in his own estimation as a pilot and military, it was otherworldly. That was his own words. So that's pretty interesting. And that was a nice step forward, I have to say. That really was to have a former elected official admit that, even though he mocked it in 97, finally admit that he saw it. And, the more credible people that come forward, and that was one of the reasons I came forward, Rob, ultimately, not only to share the data and set the record straight, because there was so much mis and disinformation out there, and also as a physician, very important, to let people know they're not alone. Even though most anomalies can be explained, when somebody has an anomalous paranormal experience, it's real to them.
Yes.
And it can fester if you don't share it. And so many people are afraid to share. And I urge people, just go on my website, contact at the top, email me. If I'm the only person you ever share with, I take confidentiality as a physician very seriously. that's a good thing because it's very healing and very cathartic to share. So that was another reason that I had to come forward. And, most of all, to just get that information out and let people decide for themselves, and the message, which is very clear. I have to tell you, not only from the Phoenix Lights, which many people got here, and they share with me all the time, but around the world. And that's the other interesting thing. When I came forward in 2004, and again, if I can be a credible voice so people actually look at the data, then I've done my job.
All right, Dr. Lynn, we have to take our final break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Exonation, the one and only Dr. LYNNE KITEI is my special guest. What a lady. www.thephoenixlights.net, and Dr. Lynn and I will be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone. Coming up in the next hour, Jose Escamilla. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back on the other side of this short break. Don't go away.
In the world today, most people want what is called the American dream. They want love, a family, a fancy car, and a nice home in a nice neighborhood. They also want a good job and money to travel to interesting places. Life is great because they have the American dream. But what happens to this dream if they hear they have a devastating illness like lung cancer? The doctor may tell them they need treatment immediately or they will be dead in 6 months. He tells them you need surgery and then you need chemotherapy to get better. When they get home, they think of many unanswered questions. They ask themselves, will I survive when so many of my friends with cancer have died? How will I deal with the pain, hair loss, nausea and vomiting, sore mouth and other side effects of chemotherapy and pain of surgery? Will I be able to keep on working? What will happen to my family? Then they look at the internet and wonder, is there a better way to deal with lung cancer and return to my American dream? Carl Helvey can tell you yes, there is a better way. Carl Helvey is a registered nurse with a doctorate in public health and a 38-year lung cancer survivor. Carl was given 6 months to live when diagnosed, and he refused chemotherapy and surgery. Carl used alternative interventions. Those not only helped him overcome lung cancer, but also to remain cancer-free and healthy for over the past 36 years since recovery. In his book, You Can Beat Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions, Dr. Helvey will tell you his story of using all-natural treatments for lung cancer and continuing to work during his treatment. Free of pain and discomfort, Carl will also share how he remained cancer and disease-free since then without chronic illnesses or prescribed medications. His story is supplemented with chapters by Dr. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Francesco Contreras, and Dr. James Forsyth, alternative integrative physicians, and Dr. Kim Dalzell and Tanya Harder-Pierce, health professionals. All have successfully helped others overcome cancer. Research presented by the alternative physicians on their treatments for lung cancer demonstrate a significantly higher long-term survival rate for lung cancer clients than those obtained by conventional doctors. In addition, their clients were free of or had reduced side effects. You Can Beat Lung Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions by Dr. Carl Helvey is now available at all major book outlets and at www.beatlungcancer.net. That's www.beatlungcancer.net. This information may help you return to the American dream.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. Dr. LYNNE KITEI is our very special guest. Her website is thephoenixlights.net. First of all, Dr. LYNNE, as always, thank you so much for coming on the X Zone. I appreciate the hard work, the dedication that you have given this topic, and the truth that you are seeking and always have sought, because you, as I told you before we went on air, in my opinion, are one of the very few honest ufologists out there. So thank you very much for sharing your information with the X Zone Nation tonight. What is your message to the worldwide audience of the Starcom radio network?
That is a very good question, and Rob, thank you so much for your plaudits. I really appreciate when people appreciate the work, because I've given up my medical career, and actually I still do medicine, and that I'm here for people to share, and that to me is a very, very important aspect. And also, as you said, I mean, just getting the facts out there. And people can decide for themselves. Everybody comes from a different background, different upbringing, different worldview, and some people can't deal with this topic. Some people don't want to, and that's okay. Everyone in their own time. But the information is there. I hope for the 20th anniversary we can share at the Ontario conference, and I have one coming up, actually, the Missouri MUFON conference in Kansas City. I'll be the guest speaker on July the 10th, and I have all that information of upcoming conferences and so forth on the Phoenix Lights Network website and also Facebook page. I try to post there because there's so many sightings. As I was saying, when I came forward in 2004, the official and accepted, except for the witnesses and experts, of course, explanation of the Phoenix Lights was that they were merely military illumination flares. Well, now people around the world, and just go on YouTube, millions of people around the world are seeing similar phenomenon because credible people come forward. That's so important. They look up at the sky, and the information is out there now, and say, wow, there's the Phoenix Lights, and that's really cool. And as you asked, the main message, and it's a universal message of all up experiences, unexplained phenomena experiences, including the Phoenix Lights, is to wake up to what we're doing, to our Earth and to ourselves before it's too late. And I hope people will really take heed of that and realize how fortunate we are to be on this planet at this time, and keep looking up.
Dr. Lynn, we have to say so long for tonight, but I do thank you so much. Please come back and share more of this wonderful information and the message that you and I and others around the world have to get out. So until then, my friend.
I'm doing that for kids now, and I'll tell you all about it soon.
Thanks very much, Dr. Lynn. Take care of yourself. So long now.
You too. Thank you. Keep looking up.
I will, dear. Exonation, Dr. LYNNE KITEI has been my guest this hour, www.thephoenixlights.net. When I come back on the other side of the top of the hour, Jose Escamilla is going to be my guest. We're going to be talking about the Roswell rods, UFOs, and much more. My name is Rob McConnell. This is Starcom. Don't go away.
Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. KITEI O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by KITEI O'Donnell is now available at KITEIO'Donnell.com or Amazon.com.